Canada has long been heralded as one of the most welcoming countries in the world, a land of opportunity for those seeking safety, better economic prospects, and a higher quality of life. Over the past several decades, millions have made Canada their new home. Yet, despite its global reputation for tolerance and prosperity, a growing body of evidence shows that a significant proportion of immigrants are choosing to leave Canada within just a few years of their arrival. This video examines why immigrants are leaving in record numbers, exploring the complex mix of economic pressures, social challenges, and evolving government policies that are prompting newcomers to reconsider their decision to settle in Canada. So, here is the list of why immigrants are leaving Canada in record numbers. Before we start, make sure you subscribe to the channel and comment your thoughts. Here we go. A land of promise under strain. Canada's reputation as a sanctuary for refugees and a magnet for skilled workers was built on decades of steady immigration and robust economic growth. Historically, successive governments have embraced immigration as a means to counterbalance an aging population and fuel economic development. Today, record numbers of newcomers continue to arrive. In recent years, however, mounting pressures, including soaring housing costs, labor market mismatches, and a challenging cost of living crisis, are undermining Canada's allure for many immigrants. Recent data from Statistics Canada show that over 15% of immigrants who arrived between 1982 and 2017 ended up leaving the country within 20 years of landing. Many of these departures occur relatively early in the newcomer's Canadian journey, often peaking between 3 and 7 years after arrival. At first glance, these numbers might seem modest. Yet when compared to the country's long-standing image as a destination where immigrants settle down for life, they reveal a significant trend. Canada's promise is not being fully realized for a growing segment of its immigrant population. Historical context and evolving migration trends. Canada's immigration story is one of transformation. For decades, successive governments increased immigration targets in an effort to build a diverse, dynamic, and resilient economy. From the early post-war years to the present day, Canada's multicultural policy has been a cornerstone of its national identity. Yet, even as the country set ambitious targets, sometimes welcoming over 400,000 immigrants in a single year, the internal dynamics have shifted dramatically. In the 1960s and 1970s, Canada was experiencing robust economic growth and relatively affordable living costs. Immigrants were drawn by the promise of decent housing, stable jobs, and a supportive social welfare system. Over time, however, Canada's urban centres, especially Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal, began to experience skyrocketing housing prices and intensified competition for jobs. The very policies that once helped immigrants integrate into the fabric of Canadian society have, in recent years, contributed to an environment where newcomers feel increasingly alienated. This shift is reflected in the statistics. While Canada's immigration policies continue to emphasize economic growth and diversity, the practical realities of life in major Canadian cities have changed. A growing number of immigrants find themselves struggling with high rents, long commutes, and mounting living expenses. This evolving landscape is prompting many to seek better prospects elsewhere, even after they have successfully navigated the arduous process of coming to Canada. Economic pressures. The cost of living and housing affordability. One of the most frequently cited reasons behind immigrants' decisions to leave Canada is the rising cost of living. The dramatic escalation in housing prices in Canada's major cities has been a game-changer. In cities like Vancouver and Toronto, rental costs have soared to the point where a significant portion of an immigrant's income, often 30% or more, is spent on housing alone. For newcomers, many of whom arrive with the hope of financial stability, this is a bitter pill to swallow. Take, for example, the story of Kara, a 25-year-old refugee from Hong Kong, who now pays $650 per month for a single-room basement apartment in Scarborough. For her, this rent accounts for nearly 30% of her take-home pay, a stark contrast to her previous life in Hong Kong, where she could save a considerable portion of her salary. When housing costs are so high, even a full-time job at minimum wage can leave immigrants struggling to make ends meet. This economic squeeze not only undermines their quality of life but also stifles upward mobility, forcing many to consider relocation. Beyond housing, the overall cost of living in Canada has risen substantially over the past decade. Daily expenses such as groceries, transportation, and healthcare have all increased, often at rates that outpace wage growth. For skilled workers who once saw Canada as a land of opportunity, the reality of stagnating salaries juxtaposed with rising living costs has led to growing disillusionment. Moreover, immigrants often face significant barriers when trying to secure jobs that match their qualifications. Many arrive with advanced degrees and valuable professional experience, only to find that their credentials are not fully recognized in the Canadian labor market. This underemployment means that highly skilled individuals may have to accept jobs far below their skill level and pay grade. Social and cultural integration challenges. Economic factors are only one part of the equation. Social and cultural challenges also play a crucial role in why immigrants choose to leave Canada. Integration into a new society is a multifaceted process that goes far beyond finding a job or a home. For many newcomers, Canada represents the hope of a better future, a place where they can live freely and participate fully in society. However, the reality of integration is often more complex and less welcoming than anticipated. One of the major challenges that immigrants face is the feeling of isolation. Moving to a new country means leaving behind familiar support networks, family, friends, and community traditions that provided comfort and stability. In Canada, immigrants may struggle to find communities where they feel they truly belong. The social fabric of Canadian cities is diverse, yet many immigrants report that they feel excluded or marginalized by mainstream society. This cultural disconnect can lead to loneliness, mental health challenges, and, ultimately, the decision to return to their home country or seek out a new destination where they believe integration will be easier. Policy shifts and government responses. Canada's immigration policies have evolved over the years, often reflecting broader socio-political debates about how best to balance economic growth, social integration, and national security. In recent years, however, policy shifts aimed at addressing domestic challenges such as housing shortages and strained social services have inadvertently contributed to an environment where immigrants feel unwelcome. Facing mounting public criticism over housing affordability and the high cost of living, the Canadian government has recently introduced measures to reduce the number of new immigrants. For example, Reuters reported that Canada plans to cut immigration levels in the coming years as part of a broader strategy to ease economic pressures. This marks a significant departure from previous years when high immigration targets were seen as key to economic growth. The new measures are designed to balance Canada's labor market needs with the capacity of its infrastructure, but they also send a mixed signal to immigrants who see fewer opportunities for growth and integration. In addition to reducing permanent immigration numbers, the government has also tightened controls on temporary residents. Many immigrants who enter Canada on temporary visas or study permits find themselves caught in a bureaucratic maze that can delay or even derail their plans for permanent settlement. A Reuters report detailed how the government is planning to deport temporary residents whose visas expire if they do not leave voluntarily, a move that has raised concerns about the treatment of vulnerable workers and students. For many, the uncertainty and fear of deportation add another layer of stress to an already challenging transition period. Industry experts have warned that Canada's immigration system is suffering from a leaky bucket problem, where the inflow of new immigrants is undermined by the exodus of those already here. A report from the Institute for Canadian Citizenship, ICC, highlighted that many of the immigrants with the greatest potential to contribute to Canada's economy are the ones most likely to leave due to frustrations with integration, housing, and economic opportunities. This phenomenon not only represents a loss of human capital but also casts doubt on the long-term sustainability of Canada's immigration strategy. Public sentiment and political pressures. Finally, public sentiment has begun to shift. Polls indicate that a significant number of Canadians now believe that the country is taking in too many immigrants, with concerns about the impact on housing, infrastructure, and social services fueling anti-immigrant rhetoric. Politicians have taken note of these concerns, and some have called for stricter immigration controls as a means of alleviating domestic pressures. While these measures may temporarily ease some of the strains on public services, they risk alienating the very people who have traditionally helped to drive Canada's innovation and economic growth. Personal stories and anecdotal evidence. Behind every statistic lies a human story, stories of hope, struggle, and sometimes, disillusionment. Consider the narrative of a Chinese immigrant featured in Maclean's, who described the steep challenges of building a life in Canada despite arriving with high hopes and qualifications. This individual found that despite being highly educated and skilled, the realities of the Canadian labor market, coupled with exorbitant housing costs, forced him to work in a job that was far below his qualifications. His story is emblematic of a broader trend, where many immigrants who once saw Canada as the land of opportunity are now forced to confront economic and social realities that differ starkly from their expectations. Another personal account comes from immigrants who have faced the isolating effects of living in cramped, unaffordable accommodations. One young refugee from Hong Kong, for instance, recounted how her initial excitement was quickly dampened by the harsh reality of living in a basement apartment where she could barely afford rent. The experience left her questioning whether the sacrifices were worth it, a sentiment that many newcomers share as they balance their dreams against the mounting pressures of daily survival. Social media and online forums also provide anecdotal evidence of widespread frustration. On platforms such as Reddit's Immigration Canada, numerous users have shared their personal experiences of being unable to secure employment that matches their expertise or of feeling marginalized in a society that appears increasingly indifferent to the challenges faced by immigrants. These voices paint a picture of a community that is growing disenchanted, a community that is not only struggling with economic hardships but also feeling abandoned by a system that once promised them a better life. Implications for Canada: brain drain and economic impact. The decision by immigrants to leave Canada carries significant implications for the country's future. When highly educated, skilled, and motivated individuals choose to exit, Canada risks experiencing a brain drain that could undermine its competitive edge in the global economy. Canada's immigration strategy has long relied on the idea that newcomers would bring with them not only diversity but also a wealth of skills and innovative potential. However, when a substantial proportion of these immigrants eventually leave, the country loses valuable human capital. High-skill workers, such as those in the technology, healthcare, and engineering sectors, are particularly at risk. Their departure not only means a loss of talent but also represents a gap in the labor market that can hinder productivity and innovation over the long term. Beyond the immediate loss of skilled labor, the exodus of immigrants can have broader economic consequences. Studies have shown that immigrants contribute significantly to Canada's GDP, start new businesses, and drive innovation. When these individuals leave, the country not only loses their direct contributions but also the multiplier effects that come from their economic activities. For example, a Reuters report pointed out that while the overall number of immigrants might seem small relative to the total immigrant population, the loss of highly skilled workers could have a disproportionate impact on key industries. Moreover, the perception of Canada as a destination where immigrants eventually leave can create a self-reinforcing cycle. Potential newcomers might choose other countries over Canada if they hear that the local conditions are unsustainable in the long run. This not only affects the immediate labor market but could also influence the global standing of Canada as a hub of innovation and opportunity. The departure of a significant number of immigrants also poses challenges to social cohesion and the multicultural fabric of Canada. Immigrants enrich Canadian society by introducing diverse cultural practices, languages, and perspectives. Their loss means that Canada may become less diverse over time, a change that could have long-term cultural and social implications. As communities become more homogenized, the very diversity that has been one of Canada's greatest strengths may be diminished. Policy repercussions. Policymakers are now faced with a dual challenge. On one hand, there is the need to attract new immigrants to sustain economic growth and address demographic challenges. On the other hand, the government must find ways to retain the talent that is already in the country. This means rethinking policies around housing, employment integration, and social support to ensure that immigrants can not only arrive in Canada but also thrive once they are here. Recent moves by the government to reduce immigration levels and tighten controls on temporary residents are symptomatic of an attempt to rebalance these challenges. However, if these measures are perceived as punitive or as a sign that Canada is no longer a land of opportunity, they could further exacerbate the problem by encouraging even more immigrants to leave. Looking ahead. Finding a balance. The challenge for Canada is to address the root causes that are driving immigrants away. While economic factors such as high housing costs and low wages are critical, the solutions must be multifaceted. To alleviate one of the most significant economic pressures, Canada needs to invest heavily in affordable housing. By increasing the supply of low-cost housing options, especially in major cities, the government can reduce the percentage of income that immigrants must allocate to rent. Programs aimed at building affordable housing and offering subsidies to new immigrants could make a substantial difference in retention rates. Such initiatives would not only help new arrivals settle more comfortably but also contribute to overall economic stability. Another key issue is the underemployment of skilled immigrants. Canada must work to streamline the process for recognizing foreign credentials and providing bridging programs that help newcomers adjust to the Canadian labor market. This could involve partnerships with professional bodies, educational institutions, and employers to create certification programs that recognize the value of international experience. When immigrants can work in fields that match their qualifications, their overall satisfaction and retention are likely to improve. Effective integration goes beyond economic measures. Comprehensive integration services, including language training, cultural orientation, and mentorship programs, can help immigrants build social networks and feel more at home. Local communities and municipal governments should be encouraged to collaborate with immigrant-serving organizations to create more inclusive environments. Initiatives that foster connections between immigrants and long-term residents can ease cultural tensions and help newcomers build the social capital necessary for success. As industries evolve and new economic challenges emerge, it is critical for Canada to ensure that its labor market policies are flexible enough to accommodate the needs of both employers and immigrant workers. By promoting sector-specific work permits, as suggested by some industry groups, the government can better align immigration flows with the demands of the economy. This approach would not only benefit businesses facing labor shortages but also provide immigrants with clearer career pathways and greater job security. Canada's immigration policies must be coordinated at both the federal and provincial levels. Disjointed policies can create confusion and undermine the overall effectiveness of integration strategies. A long-term, data-driven approach to immigration that involves regular consultations with stakeholders, including immigrant communities, industry groups, and academic experts, is essential. By ensuring that policy changes are informed by robust research and community feedback, Canada can develop strategies that are responsive to both current challenges and future opportunities. In summary, immigrants are leaving Canada in record numbers due to a confluence of factors: escalating housing costs, labor market mismatches, inadequate integration support, and broader economic and social challenges. While government policy has recently shifted toward reducing immigration levels to alleviate domestic pressures, these measures must be paired with robust efforts to improve the quality of life for those already in the country. Only then can Canada hope to retain the diverse talent that has long been its greatest asset. By rethinking its approach to immigrant integration and addressing the economic realities that new arrivals face, Canada can transform current challenges into opportunities, ensuring that the promise of a better life remains a reality for all its residents. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon for the latest upcoming travel videos. Bye-bye, see you in the next video.